start making your way to the seated area at some point at your earliest convenience. Just briefly, I will just make a brief welcome and then introduce Ryan from Foam. For those of you who haven't been to New Lab before, welcome. Glad you're here. My name is Alex King. I'm the Director of Membership here. If you're not familiar with who we are, what we do here, we're obviously a place, but also a platform for scaling frontier technologies. We are home to over 100 advanced companies working in fields from robotics to AI to blockchain, obviously. Over 600 people represent those companies at New Lab. They're valued north of $1.7 billion. We've been around for just a little over 2 years. Obviously, this building is far older than that. This used to be the primary machine shop for the Brooklyn Navy Yard, where they made engines for naval ships. I will get out of your hair, but I just wanted to say hello. If you guys have questions about membership or what kind of work happens here or what kind of companies are based here, either come find me. I'm the only guy in a blue jacket, and or send me an email, alex@newlab.com. We have Ryan, co-founder and CEO of Foam, so I'll let you take it away, but thanks for coming, everyone.
All right, hi everyone. Thanks for coming and trekking it out here. We're really excited to have our first event at the New Lab. This one is pitted out as a New York City Blockchain Showcase, so along with Foam, we invited 4 other kind of really exciting companies in the blockchain space to present. So we're going to hear from a project called MakerDAO, which has a stablecoin and credit system on chain, Relevant, which is a curation market for media, Livepeer, which is a protocol for transcribing video on the blockchain, and Balance, which is a user-friendly Web3 wallet interface. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. So Foam is a project based on building a consensus-driven map of the world, and it's a protocol using blockchain technology. The project is really large in scope, and we've wanted to tackle bringing all of the location elements into blockchain technology. So this is everything from how do we actually encode geolocation into smart contracts, and with that we developed something called a cryptospatial coordinate standard. How do we then actually visualize geospatial data on a blockchain? And with that, we've built something called the Spatial Index Visualizer. It's kind of a cross between a Bloomberg terminal and a Google Maps as a way to interact visually with blockchain information. And ultimately, what our protocol is trying to achieve is what we call proof of location. So a verified, trustless, decentralized way to verify where things have been. And so our current product, which is live now, which I'm going to spend most of this presentation on, is the Foam map. So this is on proof of location of things that don't move, what we call static proof of location, and that's points of interest data on a map, and I'll get into that. But ultimately where we're going with the project is something called dynamic proof of location. That's that we want to verify things that actually move around, like cars, people, machines, devices, etc. And with that, we use a low power radios and a time synchronization protocol to actually replicate a GPS on the ground, but open a marketplace for buying location proofs. So that's a bit out of scope for this presentation, and I'm going to speak about the Foam map and show you a demo. So Foam is about geospatial standards, protocols, and ultimately proof of location. And what we have launched so far on the Ethereum blockchain is the Foam map, which provides static proof of location. And this is a token curated registry of geographic locations. And by token curated registry, I mean a registry is like a list, but to be on this list, you have to use tokens as collateral. And you also run the risk of either being kicked off the list if you have inaccurate information. So why do we even care about this in the first place? We have tons of open source mapping today and a lot of proprietary mapping data hosted by Google, which is increasingly becoming more expensive. There are over 1 million people contributing to OpenStreetMaps, which is kind of a Wikipedia for mapping, but there are a ton of problems with vandalism and not enough incentive to actually check any of that data. So most recently, a kind of anti-Semitic hack happened where New York was renamed to Jewtropolis, and this was not caught by anyone, so it actually filtered into everything from City Bike, Street Easy, the Foam map, and Snapchat. And so that just kind of speaks to the way that we don't have any verification mechanisms for geodata today. We also had Pokemon players changing geographic data on OpenStreetMap, for example, putting a volcano at the New Lab, and all of a sudden fire Pokemon will appear. But every other app that uses OpenStreetMaps now has a volcano in Brooklyn. And so this is stuff that was really happening. And we even see issues with the US military's registry of locations being inaccurate and it causing a lot of problems for people who try to build on top of it. And the industry reaction so far has been to kind of take all this open source data and close it off, what these companies call protecting the map. So you have companies like Mapbox, Microsoft, Facebook that take all the efforts of open source mappers, but then they run their own algorithms and proprietary verification mechanisms and then sell that data back to customers. And that doesn't really cut it for open source Web3 blockchain ecosystems. So we wanted to bring geolocation data into blockchain and provide a new verification incentive, so a reason to actually go and check the data. So how the foam map token curated registry works, this is a graphic someone in our community made, which is quite fun. And so if you want to add a new location, for example, the Eiffel Tower, you actually have to stake tokens. And what that means is there's a limited supply of a token called foam token on the blockchain. And to add to the map, you have to actually stake a value to it. So there's a minimum deposit. And if everyone's happy, your point will show up on the map. However, if someone finds an issue with your point and they think it's inaccurate or false or malicious, they can also deposit tokens against you. And this kind of creates a reward pool where everyone who's part of the foam network, who's a cartographer and has a stake in the network, is then able to vote on that point and can win tokens based on the outcome. And this is a way to curate the registry. So I'm going to move into a demo of what that means. So this is the foam map, token curated registry, and it's live right now on the main net of Ethereum, and you can find it yourself at map.foam.space. And so we have basically 3 types of different points on the map. You see blue ones, red ones, and green ones. And so blue ones are pending, which mean that they were just recently added, and you might want to investigate it if you are a curator. So here we see someone added WeWork Dumbo Heights. They staked 50 tokens in it, and they added a description, etc. But let's say, for example, I thought that this was inaccurate or wrong. I can actually then challenge this point by staking tokens against it, and it opens up a vote. So what we can see is, just today or so, maybe it's not there. There was a challenge I saw there. So for us, this is really interesting because we have basically this active live map of cartographers using it, and it's basically worldwide. So one of our most active locations is in Tokyo, Japan, Seoul, London, Paris, a village in Portugal. And we really see a lot of community-driven activity of people who care about their cities and locations. Might take a minute to load up. And we have a lot of really interesting kind of observations through seeing this. So questions come up of what language should points be added in. We see in the South China Sea people actually debating sovereignty and territorial lines and challenging disputed islands. But we also see kind of really unique personal points that you probably wouldn't find on different data. And so all this is really exciting and fun for us to see, but ultimately this registry on the blockchain will be able to be referenced and used by other applications. And so I'm going to go back to this in the presentation, but we've been experimenting with different kind of incentive mechanisms for participation in the map. And one of those has been to give out what we call what is called a non-fungible token. So instead of a token that can be exchanged the same for any other token, it's one that represents something unique. And we've been making these non-fungible tokens of actual buildings and locations. And if you had added them, you could win this kind of digital sticker. And so right now we're running this campaign for people who couldn't join this event here today with us, but also everyone here can join, is if you add a point in the region of the new lab, you can win an NFT of the new lab. And so we can see all these new points that have been added today, actually. People included this tag new lab event to show they were trying to participate in that event. So there's just a lot of different mechanisms and things to learn about from the map, and happy to speak more to it as well, but I'm going to go back quickly to the presentation. So when we launched this network, we did so with a token sale where basically any consumer could join and participate if they proved that they actually knew what the protocol is about and they didn't want to just speculate. And as a global mapping project, we had over 1,000 initial participants, and this is kind of the results. So we had a really positive geographic distribution, which is a great start to this mapping project. And if you go into kind of any major city in any country, at least a few points are there. This shows currently like how many points are on the map. It's a bit outdated. We have currently over 7,000, but this chart shows how on the top, yellow ones were actually challenged, which means cartographers said, hey, this point's incorrect, or it doesn't belong there. And other people either removed them or not because they wanted to. And this is just kind of showing the growth over time of how people have been contributing to the map. And out of our total supply, more and more as it's being used, more of these tokens are kind of getting out of the circulation off the market and are actually being locked in the map. And those tokens being locked in the map are still owned by the people who put them there, but they're kind of putting their money where their mouth is and backing the map with value so that the veracity, the truthfulness, how much you can trust it actually grows with the more value of tokens staked behind it. Just some more statistics, like our top cities are New York, San Francisco. A really interesting is this village in Portugal, Ponte de Lima, etc. And you can see the kinds of points people are adding and curating. So we have food, art, attraction as the biggest, blockchain locations, nightlife, etc. And this is kind of one of the most extreme examples of one of our cartographer community members. His name's Leaf. Every time he adds a point to the map, he actually makes a video recording of him being at the location. And it's really great to see. He's mostly doing Route 66, so kind of the middle of nowhere, like the oldest covered shed or Mickey Mantle's childhood home. But what's interesting is when we asked him, why are you, documenting this in such a way, he says, well, if anyone comes and challenges my point, I want to take my case to the community and show, no, I actually was there and these points are real. So that's super interesting. And a really serious example of what we call ground truthing. So actually going to locations, verifying them before you added it to the map. Other community members have been building really exciting services on top of our API. So one entity called Blocklytics has been making the Foam Daily Digest email. And every day you can see the number of new points that have been added to the map, the number of signals, which is something outside the scope of this presentation, and also the number of new challenges. And he highlights the most interesting maps. So it's really exciting to see people hooking into this data and providing new services to the community. And as I mentioned, we're kind of have been testing these extrinsic mechanisms to try to incentivize participation. So a few months ago, we ran the Holiday Treasure Hunt, which consisted of 10 secret locations, where each day we gave out a riddle of that location. And if you added the correct point to the map, you won this NFT of the building. And so we had about 10 points, 10 riddles, and out of that, we had 500 new points added of people guessing or racing of trying to do that. So it shows kind of like different incentive models of how you can take intrinsic rewards and plug them into the protocol. So this was every day we had this riddle where you could win that NFT for the day. And this was what I mean, where of those points, for example, like Alan Turing's birthplace or the Moscow Planetarium, you win this digital image that lives on the blockchain and you're the only one who has it. So for this event, to celebrate the New York City Blockchain Showcase and the Foam map, we're doing a small campaign for today that all of you can participate in. This was just an example of the previous ones being given out. But we have made an NFT that will be a limited edition, so issued today, of the new lab, which is where we are hosted. So if you add a point to the Foam map today, we'll issue you this NFT. You can also meet Katya, one of my co-founders and chief creative officers, after the presentations and speak to her and learn more about the Foam map and sign up. That's also a way that you can get this NFT. We'll issue that to you within the next few days. And as part of that experiment, we wanted to kind of geofence locally to this area and bring a lot of attention to where Foam is headquartered. And for those who aren't actually here in New York, to also bring their attention to that area of the map and see what kind of results we can get. I think so far we had over 50 added today to this kind of zone. So I encourage you all to try it out either after this presentation with Katya or later tonight on your own time. So thank you all. Happy to take any questions briefly, but looking forward to the next presentations as well. Thanks. Yeah, is there a mic?
Who had the question? Who is it? Okay.
Yeah, our goal is not specifically to replace that, but I was really looking at the problem statement as if you have smart contracts that want to reference the real world. It's not going to be suitable for them to look off the blockchain because then you have to get in these questions of Oracle services or how do you trust that data not on the blockchain. So we had the starting point of how do we bring this data into this new economy. But ultimately, we realized that's really not enough just having the data there. It's how do you actually verify it and know that it can be trusted. And that's really touching on this static mapping data, but we're really looking to tackle the full problem of location verification, and that's a replacement for GPS because it works great to figure out where you are, but you can just spoof the information and send it off to someone else. They can't check it. So in our system, it will be bi-directional. So you can find out your location, but you can talk back and basically buy a certificate about your location. So that's really the end goal, is to support location verification, whether it's static geodata or things that move around. Yeah?
I'm thinking of a situation where the token maybe becomes prohibitively expensive for someone, in a place where, just a smaller economy. What does the token supply look like, and how do you ensure that everyone can afford to stake?
Yeah, great question. So in the static proof of locations phase, the token is not inflationary. So we issued 300 million tokens. There's a minimum deposit to add data, which is currently 50 tokens, which might be something like $2. But the entire map and registry, all the parameters are governable. And this is something that OpenStreetMap also doesn't allow, that if you're a participant, you actually have an ownership stake in the future of that protocol. And so all the parameters like minimum deposit, how long a vote lasts, the quorum that you need to pass a vote can all be changed. So if the token value, magically went up 1,000% tomorrow and now it costs $1,000 to add a point, there can be a community vote to lower the minimum deposit to 1 token or a fraction of a token. When we get to the dynamic proof of location with these radio nodes, that will be inflationary and there are mining rewards for that. I'll take 2 more in the interest of time, but happy to speak after.
Hey, can you speak a little bit to the incentive structure behind submitting a challenge and then why anyone would want to vote on one?
Sure. The incentive for that one's a bit more clear than why you would add a point in the first place. But because there's a minimum deposit, let's say 50 tokens, if you successfully challenged it and won, you would win a % of those tokens. So there's a pure financial incentive. If you initiate a challenge, you can win up to 40% of that pool. And then by voting as well, you're eligible for a smaller amount. So by either initiating a challenge or participating in a vote, somebody's going to have a payout of new tokens. Sure. Kind of the question of why you would add to OpenStreetMap. So there's tons of reasons of why people want to do mapping. They care about their local community, et cetera. In this case, it's to build up this valuable registry of information that may be referenced by other applications. And you as a cartographer may not have direct inflationary rewards because we think it's hard to reward subjective work that could be gamed, unlike mining rewards, which is computational. But over time, the token would become more scarce and you're a stakeholder and you have governance rights. And ultimately, if applications are hooking into this data, there may be ways to monetize being a point owner. But right now, it's really on believing in the protocol and wanting to be a stakeholder. Yeah, I'll take one more. Yeah.
Have you seen any instances of malicious staking or challenging by, the group that comes to mind would be if 4chan decided that they wanted to tag somebody's house as whatever it is they want to do?
So far in our experience, people have been pretty nervous about adding points. So there's a different project trying to tackle POI and rewarding people with Bitcoin, but you see that people add very scarce amount of info just to add as many points as they can to win the money. Where here people seem to be pretty cautious of what they add. And I don't have the slide here, but most of points that are challenged within the first 3 days. So there's an active amount of people kind of watching all the points. So we have had joke points, malicious points, spam points, but they've basically been filtered out and people won tokens off of, the people trying to troll. I'm just going to end in the interest of time, but I can take your question after. Okay, thank you everyone. Up next, we have Ashley from MakerDAO.
Hey guys, how's it going? I'm good. I'm feeling better now that I have some pizza and beer in my belly. It's a good start to a talk, Get things off right. Thank you guys all so much for coming, and thank you to Ryan and the foam team for having us out here. Now let's hope my friends don't send me any embarrassing Telegram messages while I'm doing this. Just gonna go quit there. You never know. Cool, so my name is Ashley Schapp. I work at MakerDAO. Hey, Susanna. Also, hey, everyone. MakerDAO is a decentralized lending platform and stablecoin. How many of you have heard of MakerDAO? Okay, cool, nice. So I won't go into the full explanation. Then I'll kind of touch on some interesting points. Just out of curiosity, how many of you have a CDP? Nice. Anyone been liquidated yet? Yeah, okay, I see you, Rich. Same. That was awkward. Yeah, so MakerDAO, decentralized lending protocol and a stablecoin. Obviously, stablecoins have been pretty hot this year. So, you know, it's been a little bit, I've got a lot of questions from reporters or from people at conferences and what have you, like, what is the big deal with stablecoins? Why do they matter? And, you know, the short answer to that is they're money. And it's kind of an interesting thing to think about, because that's what, you know, the Satoshi's vision was, and his white paper was, this is money. We're supposed to use this to send each other value, right? Buy each other rounds of beers, whatever it is. But with the volatile nature of Ethereum and Bitcoin, that's kind of not possible. I don't really want to send my friend $100 worth of Ethereum when it's worth $120, and then it goes up to, here's hoping, you know, $400 3 months from now. We'll see. But basically what the founders of Maker set out to do was create a stable unit of value backed by assets that can all be verified on-chain. So a trustless, borderless global money, which is a really new idea. The way that they've done it is really interesting, and I would love to go into every little facet. If anyone ever wants to talk about this, just call me. It's my favorite thing to discuss. But basically what we're doing is we're saying you can lock up some value of tokens, $100 worth of Ethereum, let's say, and you can borrow DAI against it. And when you're doing that, what you're doing is actually creating money. But that money is backed by more than $1 of collateral at any given point. You can then go spend that anywhere, and when you return that DAI, you can actually basically retrieve your collateral. So it's kind of like a pawn shop, a little bit. A smart contract version of a pawn shop. So what I'm going to show you today is just, and I'm going to put this away because I think I have this one. I'm going to just show you a demo of a CDP, which is really, really simple and easy. People, well, it is now. UX is an issue in crypto, as we know. And this is a nice new UX that we have. It's beautiful, but it wasn't always this way. So please appreciate how quickly this goes. It's amazing. Did anyone use the old DAI dashboard? Yeah, it was a total bitch. It took forever. I'm pretty crypto woke. I've been doing this since, 2013, and it still took me like an hour and a half to figure it out. So this is a huge improvement. So what you've got here is you've got how much ETH would you like to collateralize? How much I have, okay, let's say I have 5 ETH in here. And how much DAI would I like to generate? You can see below here, and maybe I'll just, can you guys see this okay? Maybe I'll just like zoom in a little bit so you can see it better. There we go. So max available to generate 402 DAI. So the way that it all works, it's based off of collateralization ratios. So for Ethereum, the collateralization ratio requirement is 150%. So we don't want to get too close to this max number, because then if the price of Ethereum goes down $1, which as we know it is wont to do, then you actually get liquidated. There's a lot of penalties. It's very painful. I wouldn't recommend it. So let's generate 100 DAI. So here we go. Now we have our liquidation price. That means that if our CDP is safe, our loan is in the money. Our banker, i.e. this set of smart contracts, is happy with us. They're not charging us any extra fees. They are confident in our ability to repay this up until the point where we reach this number, 30. Here you've always got current price information, liquidation penalty, which can change depending on, right now we're in single collateral DAI, which is Ethereum only, but in a few months we'll be launching multi-collateral. So the liquidation penalty will likely be different across various asset classes. If I borrow $100 worth of DAI against 5 Ether, my collateralization ratio is 604%. And of course, you got the minimum ratio and the stability fee. Stability fees are like interest rates. So when I go ahead and, I'm gonna go ahead and create this so that we have a few minutes to chat while we wait for Ethereum to do its thing. So basically the stability fee is it's an interest rate, but it's a little bit different to a bank interest rate because it can be very modular. So bank interest rates are set by a bank based on sort of tranches of credit, credit worthiness. So if you're a middle income family between the ages of 30 and 40, whether you make $150,000 a year as household income or $170,000 a year as household income, you're going to pay the same mortgage rate, more or less. You're going to pay 3.5% to 5.5% depending on where you live in the US. Maker is really interesting because it actually allows you to be very specific about risk parameters across a multitude of different asset classes. Obviously, we're in single collateral DAI, so we're just doing Ether right now. You can think of where we are at this moment as beta. Sorry if my screensaver comes up, it's toasters. But basically, what's really powerful about that is that you can actually give people the interest rate that corresponds to the actual risk that you're taking on. And not just people, corporations, businesses, other smart contracts even, you can imagine in the future, AIs that are managing a portfolio of assets. There's a lot of really interesting things that you can do with that. Oh, here we go. We have a new CDP. Congratulations. So here we go. Now we can check our current CDP. CDP stands for collateralized debt position, by the way. Deposit or withdraw collateral, and generate or pay back DAI. Got it? Thank you. Where's the exit button? All right. Oh dear. There we go. Awesome. Okay, so you can see that I have generated 100 DAI, which has been added to my balance. Sorry, I meant to zero out this account before, but I forgot. But 100 DAI has been added to my balance, so I can always go back. I can pay back. I also have up to 300 more DAI that I can generate if I'm feeling risky or if I need to buy a new pair of shoes. And I can also withdraw Ether. So this is what's kind of interesting is you'll see users of CDPs doing different kinds of things. We have this one CDP called CDP 3228. Anyone heard of this guy? He's an absolute legend. I mean, whoa, he needs to go to one of those like gambling addicts programs, I think. But he had a CDP for, I think, 7 million DAI outstanding at one point, and then he got liquidated. There's a huge fee. That's a lot of scratch we're talking about. But then he just came right back in, and he would do this thing where he would, the price of Ether would go up a little bit, and he would take out a little bit more DAI, and then go buy some more Ether and put it back into his CDP, and just slowly did that until it got back to a ratio level that was, safe in our CDP system, which was really interesting. So there are a lot of things you can do here. People typically take out DAI to go and buy other crypto assets. We've had people that want to use it to self-finance their own mortgage. They've got a bunch of Ether. They don't want to sell it at these prices. So instead of taking out a loan from the bank against the equity in their house, they will just go ahead and take out a loan at 1% interest rate against the value of their Ether, which is a really interesting use case. They're the toasters that I mentioned. Sorry. If anyone is into vintage screensavers, hit me up. I got tons. So that's kind of a CDP. Now let's go ahead and pay it back. So we'll set it max. And we can pick to pay the stability fee with MKR or with DAI. The stability fee, again, remember, is the interest rate. And we're going to pay it back. Confirm. So now what I've just done is I have paid back the 100 DAI that I owe plus the stability fee that is accrued every block. that's kind of one of the interesting things about this. I don't know, maybe it's not that interesting to you, but it's pretty interesting is that actually time doesn't really exist in smart contracts. So things have to be accrued every single block, which poses an interesting challenge, I think, for our smart contract developers. But they finally figured it out. They spent quite a lot of time on that one. And whenever you are paying this back in the form of MKR or DAI, you can pay it back in MKR or DAI. But if you pay it back in if you pay it back in DAI, let's say, it's then used to purchase MKR on the open market, which is then burned. So what that means is that if the system is running well and people trust it and DAI is secure and safe and behaving as a stable unit of value for everyone to use, people are going to be incentivized to open additional CDPs, et cetera. More interest fees will accrue, and ultimately the overall supply of Maker is intended to go down, thereby rewarding the MKR token holders, basically by, how do I say this? Do any of you work for the SEC? No, okay. You're basically rewarding the MKR token holders for providing a service, which is risk adjusting the system and making sure that everyone's money is safe. No small task, to be sure. So while we're waiting for Ethereum, does anyone have any questions? Shoot.
Do you see the stability fee changing every quarter? Is it just, it could be 3% in a month? Like how will the stability fee vary, right? Because that's gonna create a domino effect if it goes up or down.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. It's something that we think about a lot. Ultimately, the team at Maker isn't in charge of setting the stability fee. It's all of the MKR token holders. And really, the stability fee is just a tool in our toolbox for managing a money supply. And as you just saw, I just created money out of thin air, which is pretty cool. But that money supply needs a monetary policy. It needs interest rates. It needs bonds of a sort. It needs just supply and demand functionalities. So the ability to change the stability fee is one of the ways that you can constrict the supply of DAI or increase the supply of DAI. There are a few other methods that we have of doing that, but it's never going to be arbitrary. Well, that's not true. You could imagine a world in which a bunch of MKR holders collude and decide we're going to raise the interest rate to 20% overnight, but then nobody would create CDPs, and then DAI liquidity would dry right up. And if DAI liquidity dried right up, then the peg would break, and it would be really bad for them. They would lose all the money that they've invested in MKR. So MKR holders have a vested interest in ensuring that there is an equilibrium between what the market wants and what the rates are set at. Does that answer your question? Cool. Shoot.
Like the amount of ETH locked in DeFi and locked in Maker in particular.
Yeah, that graph is all over Twitter, but I don't actually have a copy of it saved. But
I think if you just Google ETH locked in DeFi, that one will come up. Cause that's like my favorite graph to watch.
Let's check it out.
Yeah, that's the one. And then if you click the Maker button down the bottom, everything gets shrunk.
So this is ETH locked in DeFi, and this is, so, it's mostly us. It's actually been pretty amazing because Maker sort of, as you can see, this is very small down here, right? This was kind of when it just started, but Maker's been at this for 5 years. We're one of the oldest projects in the space. So, now we're getting all this hype and everybody's talking about us on Twitter and everybody feels cool, but this was really, really hard. And it's still hard. A DAO with a on-chain governance system, I wouldn't recommend it unless you're really sure that you think it's the right thing for your project. But it is very interesting to see, and we saw a graph last week that came out that was like $250 million has been lent out through the DAI credit system, which is pretty absurd for, something that's relatively small. So we're excited. We have a lot of things to look forward to and are hopeful in a lot of ways. Coming up next, we've got securities tokens, non-fungible tokens, all kinds of real assets, commodities, et cetera, you name it, that can be, if it can become a token and can have some kind of price feed, then we can basically use it as collateral in our system. So it's going to be a whole brave new world of finance, and thank you guys all for being here. How am I doing on time?
Okay, thank you, Ashley, so much for that presentation. Next, we're going to have Slava from Relevant.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Slava. So I'm a founder of Relevant Protocols, and what we're working on is building protocols for curation of content online, for curation of digital content. There's like a name for that, so that's called curation markets generally, but there's still not a lot of kind of formal definition of what curation markets are and how to make a curation market. So I want to talk about how one would construct a curation market, some problems with existing designs, kind of like early mistakes that people have made, and how we at Relevant are fixing these mistakes through the use of a Sybil-resistant reputation system. All right, so why are we building, what's the need for building curation markets? So the basic idea is that distribution of content online right now is driven by advertising markets. Right, so advertising markets, in advertising markets, users are the asset, right? Their user attention is being sold to advertisers by kind of these like big platforms. And what happens, and we kind of can observe this now, is that there's very few incentives to distribute content that's actually valuable to users, right? So there may be incentives to distribute content that people click on, right? That gets a lot of clicks, but that does not necessarily correlate to value to end users, right? So if we want to solve this problem, we're live in a capitalist environment, so what we want to do is actually maybe we can make a market that has content as the underlying asset, and where the user is the demand side, right? So that's the basic motivation. So how do we begin to think about creating a market? So we need these people that buy and sell stuff, and that's kind of correlates to demand and supply. Although the caveat is there's a special kind of market that's a prediction market, right? So in a prediction market, the buy and sell gets it's like a little bit different from demand and supply. So the demand aspect is actually speculation in a prediction market. You can argue that there is some demand and kind of bootstrap. You need to bootstrap the prediction market. You need to create a market maker. But once you do that, people are just speculating and basically betting. And you can do that if you have strong fundamentals, right? So the prediction market has like a really, really strong fundamental, at least in the ideal scenario, where that's like a real event occurring. So you're betting on like whether a real event will happen or not, and then it's like pretty easy to tell, to decide whether a real event actually happens or not, right? That's like a very strong, easy thing to, more or less easy thing to decide, as opposed to like a value of a company, right? Like that's a little bit harder, you need to do research and so on. So that's like the basic stuff we need to think about when building a market. So what's an example of a curation market? So curation market is sort of like a combination of like stock market and a prediction market. So an example, like a simple example to think about in my mind, I think, it's like this decentralized job recruiter platform. So you have employers that post a bounty to fill an open position. You have users, protocol users that are like able to stake on candidates that they think are qualified, so they can like research candidates. Maybe they can create like ways to test candidates, basically figure out who the qualifying candidates are. So that's like kind of like this crowdsourcing aspect. And then employer gets a recommendation. So it's like a list of people that are, these like top stake candidates. So these are, predicted to be the most qualifying candidates. And then you do an interview process. So that's like the final step. The market is resolved through this like interview process. So there's like somebody, hopefully the employer knows how to actually tell whether a candidate is qualified or not. And they make a final decision. They hire someone. If they hire a candidate, then the bounty gets distributed to all the people that staked on that candidate. So that's kind of how that works. So let's think about how to do that with digital content. So we have this like, our demand side, right, is like people, users, communities desiring high quality content, information that's relevant to like a specific topic maybe, or value system, so it's like a well-defined context. And then the supply stuff is like maybe specialists that know a lot about this particular subject. Maybe it's a recommendation AI that focuses on this like particular field. And then the resolution, right? So that's kind of the hard part here. Like how do we actually determine the value of information? How do we determine the value? Who decides that? Right, because these are all like kind of like these amorphous groups of people. So the early attempts at doing this were like, well, okay, we can build this like market maker which lets people more or less bet on content. So I can buy shares in like a link, and then if it's successful, right, I get some payout, I get some return. So the early kind of the early proposition is like, well, maybe we don't need these like fundamental thing. We can just like be like the content that got the most people like betting on it is probably the best content, right? We're just gonna say that. But there's a big problem with that, right? That kind of that just like breaks the market and renders it totally useless, because when you take away the fundamentals in the market, all you have left is speculation, right? And that's, when you have that, that's like not a useful market fundamentally. Because, right, for that very same reason, because it's not tied to any fundamental value. Right, the whole point of the market is that it reflects some sort of fundamental value. It makes it easier to like observe it, transact with it, and so on and so on. if that's missing, our whole market is useless, right? All you get is speculation. If you want the price to go up, you just pump the price. If you want it to go down, you dump. So it's like, you can't derive useful information out of that. If we go back to our example of this this recruiter problem, this recruiter platform, right? That's as if though employers got lazy. They're like, fuck this, we don't actually need to interview. It's like usually we see that the top staking candidate is the one that's the best qualifying one. Why don't we forget the interview process, save some money, we just hire whoever the top staking candidate is. Well, that just like destroys the incentive model, because now it's not a matter of finding the most qualifying candidate. It's just like it's a matter of finding the most popular candidate, right? Or just like convincing everyone, doing a bunch of marketing and convincing everyone to back this one candidate so that they get to the top of the list and they get the job. And that's right. So that's like independent of how of the actual qualifications of that person. So this is the same reason why a lot of the TCR designs don't work. Same reason why there's like problems like assassination markets and prediction markets, right? So like the assassination market is when I bet that person A, I bet, like $10 million that person A is not going to get assassinated. Well, that's equivalent to like a $10 million bounty to assassinate that person. So that's an instance of where, right, the market starts impacting the underlying asset versus the other way around. So the takeaway from that is that, right, staking and prediction is not the same as curation. We don't want those things to be the same thing. We want those things to be distinct, right? So like, just like prediction is independent from the real world outcome in prediction markets, staking in a curation market should be independent from like the actual curation of like the actual ranking of like what it is we decide is actually valuable. So the general framework that I'd like to propose is this like 3-stage process where we start out with some input, some data, a feed, like a real-time feed. We filter that feed by prediction, so staking. And then we have this final resolution stage where we have some curators, right? And I'll talk about how we kind of define who those curators are. So we have some curators, some decision-making governance process of actually deciding which one of these predictions is actually valuable, is actually correct, right? And deserves a payout, a reward. Just a brief case study of like an early curation market. So the biggest one, it's probably like the biggest decentralized app out there, Steemit. So here curation is like the same thing that I've been kind of describing, where you can bet on a post, you're staking. And then, if the post gets highly ranked, you're getting a payout, but the issue is that the ranking is determined by stake, by the amount of money people staked on this post. Wrong way. So that's a self-fulfilling prediction market, right? So it's the prediction becomes the outcome, and like the ranking has no clear meaning. And it is kind of observable, right? If you go to Steemit, it's kind of like this crazy mess. There's like other issues going on, but then there's no real like reasoning behind the rankings on Steemit. So it could be like anything from market size to preferences of wealthy whales, some sort of extrinsic incentives, like all of that stuff can impact the rankings. And there's no clear curation criteria. So what we're doing is we've kind of designed this system for this resolution layer. It's based on a reputation system that's based on PageRank, a PageRank algorithm. So basically, people are able to stake on content as a prediction that it will be rated highly within a specific community of users, right? So, and that community has a reputation system, and they're basically able to together to vote on content to decide on a particular ranking, rank or like value of a particular piece of content. So in our case, right, it's just like these real-time feeds are coming in, a bunch of stuff. People are posting, sharing on wherever, Twitter or Medium, or like looking at all the different news outlets, right? And then we're like taking all this information, it's getting ordered by stake. So it's it could be recommendation algorithms staking on content. So maybe there's an AI that goes out and finds 20 top blockchain articles each day and recommends them to all the blockchain communities by staking like a few tokens on each one. Maybe there's an advertiser that's like, okay, I have this like awesome post I want to share about my product. I'm going to stake a bunch, I'm going to stake 100 tokens on that. Hopefully, like people that are in relevant communities will notice this. Or human curators that are like, okay, I know that this is going to be relevant to these specific communities I'm active on. I'm going to stake on them as a bet. Maybe I'll earn some income. And then the final kind of determination is made by users that have high reputation within a community. So their upvotes, all their votes are weighed by their reputation, and that's how the final rankings are determined. So just a note on Sybil-resistant reputation, right? So a lot of designs that we see in the crypto world are using tokens for any sort of decision-making, governance, because it's a Sybil-resistant mechanism. To an extent, okay, voting with money offers a degree of Sybil resistance, right? It makes Sybil attacks expensive. But the trade-off is, and it's a huge trade-off, right? First you get plutocracy, which is, right, now we're only taking into account opinions and preferences of rich users, which may not always be the best, right? The best or the most expert opinions. And the other trade-off we're making is the lack of context, right? So sometimes we really want a specific group of people with a specific type of experience or specific type of training to make decisions, right? Like we want legal advice from lawyers that have a legal, that have their law degree, not from just like rich Twitter users on Twitter. So that kind of, you can't get that with voting with tokens. You can't just like prevent somebody rich from coming in and being like, I know what I'm talking about and let me tell you my opinion. So the personalized page rank system is another tool we can use. It offers Sybil-resistant properties and has its own set of trade-offs. The main one being that there are some trust assumptions that we will have to make if we want to compute global reputation. By global, I mean just for like for like a community or for like a group of people. And there's like some other things like it's harder to compute on on something like Ethereum and so on. But here's how it works. Here's some like intuition behind how it works and how this like trust assumption works. And specifically how we're constructing this this system within Relevant. So in Relevant, each community has its own reputation system. So here's an example of one community, right? This is like a network graph of a single community. So each community has a set of trusted users, right? So they're kind of like admins or moderators in a traditional sense. And you can require, right, communities can require different, kind of different levels of identity verification. Ideally, these are real identities, they have some accountability, and so on. So these users are assumed to be trustworthy. And basically, we construct a reputation system that stems from these users. So in this graph, all the dots are all the other users in this community. And they can be pseudonymous, right? They don't have to have real identities. They can just be like Ethereum, public keys, or whatever it is. And then each edge is an upvote of a comment. So, right, so if one of the admins upvotes this guy's comment, this guy's reputation goes up, right? So the reputation kind of propagates from the admins to the rest of the users. Now this guy has a reputation when he upvotes this particular piece of content, this post, like the ranking of the post goes up. So within this within this graph, you have both users and content. And it's you know, for regular users, there is this level of Sybil resistance where, because we have this personalization vector, it doesn't matter. Like if this guy creates a bunch of Sybil nodes and they all upvote this link, it's the same thing as just like this one person upvoting this link. Doesn't make any difference. The only people that can make attacks are the admins, and there can be all sorts of kind of ways to monitor. There's fewer of them, so we can monitor them easier and kind of track what they're doing. And then there's ways to vote them out of office or blacklist users and so on. So the way we, just like some intuition behind bootstrapping and governance for the system is that, you know, if I'm starting a community, right, I'm probably going to make myself an admin. Maybe I'll invite some people I trust to be admins also. Kind of bootstrap the system this way. Once it grows, right, the reputation system kind of gets propagated to all the different users. We can then start using these reputation weight voting to elect new admins or remove abusive admins or people that become inactive. So this kind of creates a self-reinforcing system where, you know, if you bootstrap it in the right way, it kind of propagates itself, even if like the original admins leave, like somebody else becomes an admin, and so on. But the other nice thing about it is there's no clear distinction, right, between an admin and a user with high reputation. The user with high reputation basically has the same weight, the same impact. So what we accomplish is this kind of like crowdsourced discovery layer, right? By using staking. Then we narrow the funnel a little bit, and we have this. It's still this like open, decentralized kind of crowdsourced expertise layer, because again, this it's like creates this hierarchy using reputation. Where any user can still kind of like easily transition between these states from just like staking to earning a bunch of reputation, earning a little bit more reputation. So there's like this continuum between, the different roles any given user can take, which is a really nice system and a really cool thing. So just some takeaways. Staking is great signaling mechanism, great prediction mechanism, but should not be used for final decision making. We should, figure out a way how to use expertise and reputation for final decision making, for resolving markets, for enforcing curation criteria. Tokens are not the only Sybil resistant mechanism. We can use personalized page rank. And that's a great kind of token engineering primitive, especially when it's combined with tokens and interacting with cryptocurrencies. And that's all. So we're going to be launching our beta app. So the app is actually it's similar to Reddit with these like extra components where it's this reputation, kind of like community-specific reputation. It's not transferable. So the community is kind of like a subreddit, so you can earn reputation within this community, and you can like stake tokens on post as a prediction of how valuable they are to a given community. So we're launching that early next month, March 5th. So you can sign up for the waitlist to get an invite on relevant.community. And yeah, thank you. Let me know if you have any quick questions. Do we have time for questions? Yeah.
Completely naive, and I just want to, does this thing work? Yeah, sorry. Just want to ask a simple question that probably everyone else in this room knows the answer to. But is staking via tokens, to me, sounds like stock investing, which is regulated by the SEC. And I'm just curious if tokenizing allows us to all get around like the rules of stock, who's allowed to invest in stock. Now, I know there's been the Jobs Act that has made it easier for stock investment at a lower wealth rate, but I was just curious if tokens aren't even regulated within that system.
In our specific case, so I think the first thing to look at is like a prediction market. I'm not sure. There are questions about whether prediction markets are regulated by the SEC or not, or like I think it's a different kind of subset of. So it's not quite stocks because it's more of this like prediction. It's more of a gambling game. That kind of stuff is actually abstracted away. So you don't have like an individual token. You have these like temporary share of this given token, but it resolves really quickly after like, in our case, after 3 days, it just like, that's the cutoff that looks at the ranking and it either gives you a reward or you're not. In our case, you're also not directly investing your money, so you can't lose your money. You basically lock up this global token as a bet on this specific thing, and then you get your token back, and maybe you get some rewards. And the money that you're paying is coming out of inflation, right? So the fee that you're actually paying is this like whatever the inflation rate is, so like 10% inflation. Everyone that uses the protocol pays that together, and that's where the rewards are coming from. So it's kind of this way where it's like gambling light, sort of like safe, where you can't lose your house, right, by like doing this thing. Cool.
Thank you, Slava, for that. We now have Angie, a software developer at Livepeer.
Hi, everyone. Are you guys still awake? All right, so my name is Angie Ramirez, and I'm a software engineer at Livepeer. And Livepeer, how many of you guys have heard of Livepeer before? Okay, how many of you guys have seen it because you've seen it streaming a conference somewhere, or because you've seen one of our chats before? Awesome, thank you. So yeah, for those of you guys who don't know, Livepeer is a decentralized open source video infrastructure marketplace built on the Ethereum blockchain. So today I'll touch upon a couple of those points. I'll tell you how Livepeer uses the blockchain, but I'll also, explain how video works on the internet, because Livepeer is really trying to solve one of those specific pain points in the video ecosystem on the internet. I'll go into an overview of Livepeer's video infrastructure, but I'll try something that is typically known to be pretty risky, which is do a live demo right at the start. So I am hoping and crossing my fingers that it actually works. So here. All right, so I'm gonna go to my terminal. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna run two different scripts. One script which runs a broadcaster node, and a broadcaster node is a node that actually ingests video. And then the other script is gonna run a transcoder node. And then I'll talk a little bit more about what transcoding is to those of you guys who don't know how that works. But here I have it pre-populated, and I could go into what all of these different options mean, but I think that would take me a long time. So here I'm running one of my nodes. I'm running a different node. And then if I go into my video streaming service, how many of you guys have used OBS before? Okay, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 people who are more familiar with live video streaming. So here you see me on the screen. I'll start screaming, and uh-oh. Look at that. It's a 500. Let's try that again and see if it works now. Okay, there we go. So as you can see on the screen, you have several different versions of the same video. And you can see that they're different sizes. And the different sizes correspond to just the different bit rates of the actual video. And they're being live transcoded as we speak. And you can see that there's a slight delay as well. But we will talk about that a little bit later. But all right, the live demo worked. Okay. All right, so let me stop these nodes here, and I'll try to keep the presentation brief because I know we're a little bit short on time. So yeah, like I mentioned before I talk about how we actually use the blockchain, I think it's important to talk about how the whole entire video infrastructure system works on the internet. So as you can see here on the left side of the diagram, you have a broadcaster, and a broadcaster can be any kind of company. It can be you with your phone, like a BuzzFeed or a Twitter or a Twitch. And once the video leaves your phone or your device or your camera, it goes into something called the media server. And a media server is not unlike a web server. And a web server, as you know, takes your web page and renders it to all of your users. A media server just takes the video and does something really important called video transcoding. And video transcoding is simply, like you saw on the screen, taking one single stream of video and then converting it to different streams of different resolutions, different sizes, and using different codecs to do so. And why is that important? Why do we need to do that for every single video that's on the internet? The reason is that someone, for example, in rural Colombia, does not have the same access to the same internet connection that you and I do here. They also don't have the same phone or the same browser. And so for them to be able to watch a really high quality stream would actually take them a long time to actually load the video. And so for them, you would choose one of the smaller renditions you saw on the screen so that they could load the video in a reasonable amount of time. And of course, we, with our high-speed internet, would get some of the higher quality transcoding. So that's the media server. And then you have other components of that system, like the CDN. And then you have your end users, as you see with the phone and the laptop and the screen. But what's really interesting about this system is that there's a big problem. And first, I want to ask you a question. What percentage of the internet do you guys think is taken up by video? 70? 80? Okay. So that number right now is actually a little bit over 70%. So it's about 73%, or it was in 2016. And that number is projected to be over 80% in 2021. So that actually poses a problem because video transcoding is essential. It's really expensive. If you go to a centralized provider like AWS, you'll end up paying $3 per stream per hour. And if you think about a company like Twitch that might be running 50,000 concurrent streams at the same time, that's already going to be an incredibly high cost. If you're running 100,000 streams, you're going to be paying per hour $300,000 just to do that one single piece, the media server piece in your transcoding system. So what Livepeer is doing is really replacing that piece of the system with a decentralized video transcoding network. And why do we use the blockchain? Why can't we just create like another YouTube? So there are a couple of different components or characteristics of the blockchain that are really important to us. And the first one is trustless coordination. So if you think about this, creating a decentralized marketplace on the blockchain, and you think about how many different computers with extra computing power could theoretically be on our network, it would be really difficult to coordinate interactions between them and do so in a trustful way. Another reason, and the second reason, is to coordinate payments between the different actors on the system. So as you saw, you have a broadcaster, you have a transcoder, and the transcoder is being paid for some of the transcoding work that they're doing. So essentially, we need a way for these two different machines to do a direct transfer of value without an intermediary in the middle, or like a bank or a traditional institution to do so. The third reason is security. So when I say security in our system, I'm talking about like, how do we know that that transcoder is actually doing the work correctly? How do we know that they're actually encoding the video to 720p or to 1080p with the exact specifications that we want? So in order to incentivize our users or our transcoders to actually do the work correctly, we have a system of penalties. So every individual transcoder and broadcaster actually are required to have a deposit, which can get slashed if they don't do the work correctly. And that is all handled by our smart contract on the blockchain. And now the first three items, I think, our system could exist with the first three items alone. But I think what really makes it special is that we have an entire system outside of just the relationship between transcoders and broadcasters that incentivizes the participation from actors all over the system. And that's something that I'll talk to you guys a little bit here. Well, actually here, it's just the traditional exchange of value between a broadcaster, the Livepeer network, and then you have the blockchain involved in the middle. But really, the entire system includes more than just the broadcaster and the transcoders. So here we have the entire ecosystem pictured. So if we start from the top left, we'll see the Livepeer protocol. And I know that some of the other projects mention inflation. We use inflation as well. And so the Livepeer protocol is generating inflationary rewards that are then given to these transcoders in the middle. And then those transcoders in the middle are sharing some of that inflation with some of the token holders on the right-hand side of the page. Transcoders are also earning a fee, and that fee is an ETH, or I think in the future will allow other cryptocurrencies to be exchanged as well. But yeah, it's an entire ecosystem, self-contained, of transferring of value. And on the right, you also have below that little girl, badly drawn little girl, you have the app developers as well. And so an app developer can essentially go into our system and create an app that will make it easier for anyone on the network to interact with our protocol. So an example of that might be, actually, I think I have an example a little bit later, but I'll show it to you. An example of that might be like an entire screen that will show the status of the network itself. And there are a couple of others that I'll talk about in a little bit, but just keep this picture in your mind because the blockchain really makes it possible for the value of the system to be really distributed correctly amongst all participants. And so here I have a screenshot of our main Explorer page with our transcoders. And you can see that each transcoder on the system can set their own reward cut and their own fee share. And you, as a broadcaster or a user, can go in and select which of these transcoders you'd like to stake your token towards. And actually, that's something I didn't mention with the token holders. So their role in the network is really to be a vetting system for these transcoders, and so if a transcoder has more tokens staked towards it, then that transcoder is potentially or probably a better transcoder. And we actually currently have a cap on the number of active transcoders that can be in our system at a single time. and that cap is about 15. It's going to be increased to 25, and eventually that cap is going to be no longer there. But for now, these tokens holders are really indicated whether or not that transcoder is doing a good job on our system. So in summary, we have all these different roles of protocol developers, we have our miners, we have our app developers, our token holders, and just regular businesses or URI who want to do transcoding on the system. And another really important piece that I'd like to talk about here is why we're actually using the Ethereum blockchain. And so Livepeer was started about 2 years ago, and I joined about 6 months ago, so I haven't been there from the beginning. But at that point, Ethereum was really the only platform with complex enough smart contracts that would allow the functioning of our smart contracts, which are thousands of lines long. And it really was the only ecosystem that provided the kind of developer tools we needed, and it allowed for collaboration with other players in the transcoding system or in the video streaming system that I talked about in the beginning, to really have the possibility of maybe creating a completely decentralized video infrastructure system. And in the beginning, we ran into some initial challenges like high gas costs and difficult to test and iterate. But at the moment, we're actually working on a bunch of layer 2 solutions that will allow us to reduce the cost of actually transacting on our system. And this gets a little bit more technical, but if you know what probabilistic micropayments are, we're exploring that avenue, and just moving a lot of our interacting and job negotiation off the chain. And so what is the future of Livepeer? So you know, and many of you have seen that Livepeer does streaming of conferences, and you know that's actually something that's run by our community members. But in the future, we hope that either Livepeer can expand to other parts of the video infrastructure system on the internet, or that we can collaborate with other decentralized open source projects who are doing some of the work on the CDN side or some of the work on the actual video distribution. And hopefully we can provide an open source system for anyone in the world, regardless of where they live, of how much their currency is worth. A really good, reliable system which they can use to take a video and stream wherever they want. And some of those use cases you can see here. So uncensorable live journalism, auto-scaling, social video services, and one that is actually one of my favorites is universities, for example, universities that are streaming classes. There's really no reason why those classes can't all be live streamed on the internet, but the real barrier now is the cost of doing so. And so hopefully, if we do have this open source system with you know, infrastructure available for anyone who wants to use it anywhere in the world, hopefully more and more people will have access to some of these educational materials that are being live streamed. And yeah, there are tons of ways you can get involved. You can join our Discord channel. You can join us on our community call this Thursday. And if you go on our website, you'll have all of these links, so you don't have to run and copy these down. But if you're a developer, you can definitely join and use the network for broadcasting. You can become a transcoder or build a decentralized app on the Livepeer network. But yeah, that's a little short introduction to Livepeer, and if we have any time for questions, I'd love to take some. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, Ashley.
Actually, just 2 questions. One, could you see Livepeer being something in the future that's integrated as a choice? Let's say someone wants to upload a video to YouTube, they can choose to have it go through Livepeer or an Amazon Web Service or something. So that's question 1. And 2, why is the number of transcoders capped, and how do you prevent censorship?
Totally. So for the first question, we kind of see, we see ourselves as kind of an alternative to some of those systems. So I can't imagine that YouTube would want to use our decentralized transcoding system because they're sure maybe the underlying technology they could theoretically do so, but the point of our system is that it can be integrated into any media server that you'd like. So I could see an alternative to like a decentralized alternative to YouTube propping up and allowing producers and allowing people creating content to retain more of that content because they are paying less for transcoding. So the actual cost of running this infrastructure will be dramatically less. And we're talking about literally like a 95% reduction in cost in transcoding. Mm-hmm. That's true. At the moment, we're not running our own media service. We're not running our own like front end for broadcasting some of this video. We do have one, and it is in development, but that's not what we're focused on at the moment. But yes, you're right that you can. If you guys have built any kind of streaming service, you can definitely use us on the back end. I think you saw how easy it was to just run a script on your computer and use just use our code to stream the video. Oh yeah. Well, I mean it works as it works on any decentralized system. So if one of the nodes is taken down, you have a failover scenario in which you can use a different one. Mm-hmm. That's definitely a possibility, and I think your question was more centered around this like 15 transcoder limit, and that's something that we're just doing as we test out our system. So we're actually working to push out Livepeer 2.0. It's called Streamflow if you want to look it up online. But once that is out, we will be able to have any number of transcoders or orchestrators on the system. So it would virtually be impossible to have every single person with extra computing power in the world running a transcoder node collude. Yep. And I think last one. Yep.
Thank you. I had a question about the 87%. Is that going to create a stopgap in terms of video quality when it reaches that point?
Potentially, I think the more important point to take from that number is that it's going to be really expensive for anyone to use a centralized provider like AWS to run streams. It's about $3 per stream per hour to do so. I think the infrastructure itself will keep growing with the demand, but the real problem is going to be how can we? Sure. Honestly, our system is very scalable. And so you can theoretically add extra computing power from all of these unused video cards around the world and really increase the capacity of the network. But I think we're more focused on making sure the cost is as close to the cost of electricity as possible, whereas AWS marks things up by more than 10x. At the moment. So it is really unaffordable to a lot of smaller companies, especially companies in developing countries that don't have that kind of currency or purchasing power. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie, for that presentation, and we're all going to stick around a bit at the end for more questions, but wrapping up the New York City Showcase, we have Richard Burton from Balance Wallet, so please take it away.
Cool, I'm going to keep it short. And I'm also going to start with a live demo, so hopefully this works. No worries. Oh, don't worry about that. Okay, can't blame Ethereum for the screen right now. I'm not sure why that's not. Oh, there we go. Great. So yeah, I'm working on a project called Balance with some friends up in Williamsburg, and I'd love to show you kind of the product that we've launched so far. It's this tool called Balance Manager. You can think of this as an alternative to my crypto or my Ether wallet, and people use it to manage hundreds of millions of tokens and move millions around. And so you can connect to MetaMask like most tools, You can see here earlier, I participated in the new lab project. We also tokenized one of our teammates, Mike, and they drew me on the whiteboard. So we can see, we can dive in here and see in OpenSea that they lovingly kind of recorded me on the whiteboard and then made a token for me. So these are tools that we're building to make it easier to interact with the Ethereum protocol. And one of the projects that we spent the last year working on and shipping out for developers is something called Wallet Connect. So Wallet Connect is a way for people with mobile wallets that support it to log into web-based apps. So I'm going to try and get this to work on the presentation board. So on my phone, I've got the wallet. And then it's going to establish an end-to-end connection between my phone and the dApp. And so now I can do away with a Chrome extension and use my phone as the kind of key signing and tool here. And so this is what we've kind of been working on over the last year. And I'd like to briefly show you some of the things that we're going to be shipping this year. So I'll just head into the presentation. So we can think of what we have now as a basic wallet. It's a way to interact with Ethereum. We support kind of ERC20, the standard tokens, ERC721, the tokens that are like CryptoKitties. We've developed this standard called Wallet Connect and kind of separated that from Balance so that other people can use it. And then we've really obsessed over a simple send and receive flow, making it as simple as possible. And this is a kind of preview of one of our website that we're kind of updating at the moment. But really what we want to do is help people grow their balance. And that we're kind of focusing on two areas. And that is protocols where you can kind of invest and make a return. And this is broadly called the kind of open financial system. And also, we're thinking a lot about ways in which you can earn money from some of these protocols and how we can make user interfaces to make that a lot simpler for regular people. And so there's a variety of protocols where you can actually kind of work for them and do things and get rewarded in tokens. Obviously, Ryan showed you Foam. We've seen a presentation from Livepeer. And there's a whole bunch of these where you're going to be able to do work for the protocol and earn a return. And we want to bring a lot of that right onto your phone. So let's dive into an example. We've been doing an awful lot of work with Maker. Now, as we mentioned, a lot of people have collateralized debt positions, and they are constantly wanting to know whether they're about to get liquidated. I personally had one liquidated, and I'd preferred it not to have happened. And so we're building a tool here where your CDP will be represented as a card within your wallet. And then if you tap on that, you can dive in and kind of see where you're at in terms of your collateralization ratio. And then if you want, you can kind of repay it and pay down the debt. And we're trying to make that as simple as possible and give you kind of ways to explore what different kind of ratios you could use, whether you want to repay ETH or DAI. And then, crucially, be able to set up notifications based on your tolerance for risk and kind of get notified by the app if you're close to getting liquidated. And so this is, I hope, a good example of where while everybody else is building up the infrastructure from the base and kind of using Ethereum as their kind of as the substrate, we're really starting with the customer use cases and the things that people might do and trying to work down towards the protocols and as best as we can work with the right people and teams and projects and code to make these things easier to use. And as an experiment and for this presentation, I kind of started thinking through what this would look like if we were to do something for Foam. And so Foam's really cool in that you can kind of navigate around and challenge things and earn tokens. And they do have a dApp that works on mobile dApp browsers. And these are browsers that are contained within apps like Trust Wallet and Coinbase Wallet and IM Token. But I kind of wanted to take a little time and imagine what it would look like as a fully native experience. We know that people obviously run around and stare at their phone and do crazy things with Pokemon Go. And so if we could make the experience really engaging and if people could earn tokens on their phone, I think that could be pretty compelling. And here's a little mock-up. So you can imagine there'd be a little card in the earn section of the Balance wallet. And if you were to kind of set up a phone position or establish some kind of location, you could get a notification if there was potentially something that you could challenge nearby you, and you could see if it was correct or not, and if it wasn't, you could begin challenging those people. One of the ones that has quite a bit of tokens staked on it is the Williamsburg Hotel, and if that was incorrect, you could perhaps challenge that and earn a return. And I hope that I'm just kind of sharing here a rough preview of how we can layer on top of all these really interesting protocols and make them relatively accessible for regular people. If you're interested in the project and would like to join the test flight and give us feedback, you can follow us on balance_IO on Twitter and direct message us, and the links to everything are on there. But thanks so much for your time. I know it's been a long evening, and I'd love to chat to you afterwards.
Okay, thank you all for coming and joining for the event. I think most of the speakers will be sticking around for a bit. We have the space for a little longer, so feel free to grab some drinks or if there's any pizza left, and thank you again. Also, if you want to learn more about the foam map or get any foam stickers, you can see Katya to the left. Thanks.